Hi, and welcome to my very first A God with Dirty Feet podcast. So what is A God with Dirty Feet all about? I've taken the title from a piece of prose that I wrote a few years ago, and basically the gist of it is that what I really want in a God, if I'm going to have one, is a God with his feet firmly planted on the ground, as opposed to, the Christ or the God that is up there somewhere away from all of us. And we know what down to earth means. And for me, I think it's imperative that if we're going to follow a spiritual leader, that they should not be all spirit. They should be actually, walking the same earth as we are and understand some of the issues that we face as human beings, as well as spiritual beings. So today I wanted to just basically break down what I call the diaspora group. That the definition of that being the people who've left their church context. And as you might have gathered from the intro, this podcast is going to be about people who have removed themselves from a church context, specifically a charismatic Pentecostal kind of context. So that could include denominations such as Hillsong, or churches that come under the umbrella of the Australian Christian churches. So while I'm not going to identify particular churches or denominations, what I really wanted to concentrate on is what and who we are as this diaspora, this group who've moved from what was basically a spiritual home, a place of belonging and community with its own culture, its own rules, its own way of doing things, and basically we found ourselves now on the outside of that. I've been involved in kind of discussions about this for several years. I used to have a Facebook group called Free Range Christians, which was specifically for people who were either deconstructing their faith or who had been in church context for many years and had found that those no longer had meaning for them. And so they were wanting to kind of push the boundaries, thus the phrase free range. They were still Christian, still claiming a personal faith and relationship with Jesus Christ, but they just felt that the church wasn't the framework within which they wanted to move that faith forward. So they'd either remove themselves from a church context, or they were just kind of step sideways, or were actually pushing in a church context deeper into, say, the mystery, the questions, the meaning making, what is all that about. And basically that's going to be the kind of conversations that we're going to have on A God with Dirty Feet. And I'm going to invite you that if you've got anything that you think needs bringing up or you want to discuss, please get in touch and we'll have a look at that. Now, we come with a certain amount of baggage as members of the community who've been through this particular church leaving experience. And I think it's worth identifying that as a quite unique experience. It's not like if you grew up in the Catholic Church or the Anglican Church and then as an adult you just decided you didn't want to do that anymore. More and more of us are finding that there is a certain culture and a cultural experience around these kinds of churches, these Pentecostal, charismatic, postmodern kind of contemporary churches and the franchises that grow up around them, that bring with them a certain set of psychosocial issues, particularly when we leave. So I'm just going to have a bit of a talk about that. I'm going to put up a slide because I just want to clarify for you, for myself, why it's so difficult, not just for us to leave, but to engage back into general society when we do, and what the pathways look like, so we can just sort of place ourselves and understand why it's so difficult. Once you've left, you feel this in-between kind of, oh my God, I don't belong to general society because I have this set of spiritual experiences, I have this set of church culture experiences that I can't pretend never happened. I may even still have faith in God and trust in Christ. I may still identify as a Christian, but I'm not the way I was in the first place. I'm different. And I can't step backwards because I know too much, or I've been hurt too much, or whatever. So we find ourselves at a really weird interface, somewhere in between. And there's all these pathways, and some of them are blocked and some of them are open. So I just wanted to have a look at what it looks like. What I'm hoping I can demonstrate for you here is why it is so difficult once we've left these very enmeshed, very kind of heavy cultural church cultures, why it's very hard for us to just sort of go back to normal. We can't. So in looking at this diagram, I just want to go through each one and describe the little bubbles to you. So general society. So this is like general society. It's where we were before the church found us, or the place we dabble in when we're going to church, you know. But it's reality. So general society, I would say, is just our everyday lives, the families grew up in, our communities around us, you know, general society with all the politic and everything that goes with it, and the culture. Now, down the bottom you'll see what I've articulated as Hillsong ACC culture. Now, I want you to translate this into any sort of context that you're within. So we could be talking about an Anglican church, or we could be talking about a uniting church. We could even be talking about a Catholic church. But what I've identified here is specifically what I know. So this is what I'm familiar with, and what I know is the Hillsong ACC way of doing church. And I've highlighted it in red down there because it really is the heart of what we're talking about. So we can see general society up the top there, or over here, and we see church culture as its own little paradigm down the bottom there, its own little subculture. And you'll see over the side there in purple is the diaspora, the ex-members, the ones who've chosen and self-selected out, or who've been forced out because of, you know, they just couldn't take it anymore, or because something terrible happened. So these are the people that are really hurting, or disillusioned, or they're recovering. And this is what we know, is that this is a valid and growing group, but there's a reason why we can't see them. They're not walking around with, you know, red stickers on their heads to identify them. We only know each other because we talk the same language, we talk the same lingo, and we just seem to be sort of dangling on the outside of church and dangling on the outside of general society, where we don't really fit into either one because we know too much about the church. So, you know, we can't go back there. But we don't quite fit into general society either, because we've seen that from a different perspective as well. And a lot of, you know, our values and our Christian beliefs may still be keeping us from kind of enmeshing ourselves completely back into general society post-church. So you'll see I've put some little arrows and bits and bobs there, and I just want to talk you through that. So, I mean, if we're talking about people who weren't born into the church context, if we're talking about people who come into it later in life, or the way in is through that green triangle. And there's a reason why I made it a triangle, is because it's a multi-level marketing scheme, basically, if we're talking about Hillsong and ACC. But the way to get in is through the church orientation process, which they call salvation, or getting saved, or whatever they call that little gate. You can see I've depicted it as a door. So only way in, you want to get in, or, you know, you're taking on this idea of salvation, and they will tell you that's the only way into God's family, which is basically the church. So you can't just get saved and then go home and live your life as you were before. If you're getting saved in this particular context that we understand, which is the charismatic Pentecostal Hillsong kind of culture, once you get saved, that's it. You have to come home to church. You have to be in a church family. You have to be enmeshed in church culture. You have to be a regular church goer, and you have to want all the things that they want and do all the things that they do. So we know that. We know that you can't just move from general society through your green triangle to getting, saved and then just go on as you were before. That's just not how it happens. We're expected to actually close that door that you see there in that little green triangle. Once you're through it, you're supposed to close it, and there's no way back. You're now changed forever. You're now one of us. You're now in this red bubble, and there's just absolutely no way back to general society. And you'll see that in this diagram. There's no way. There's no way back. All the arrows come through salvation, or whatever you want to call it. What would you call it? Conversion, perhaps? Through to church. It's a one-way street. The only way out is to the purple bubble. We can't ever go back to the way we were through that green triangle. That path that's closed. So what happens is we get forced through this purple bubble. Now, I've called it the diaspora, but you could call it the disillusioned. You could call it the deconstructing. You could call it the hurt and the abused, the victimised. Call it what you will, but this is actually the only way back. So you've either been kicked out or you've self-selected out. Not necessarily out of your Christianity, but out of this toxic culture, which does exist. We know it exists. We've seen it, we've experienced it, we've felt it, but there's actually no way back except through the purple bubble. So you can see there that I've drawn an arrow out of Hillsong ACC culture or church culture, whatever you want to call it, or you define it. There's a one-way arrow out. That's the only way you can actually get out. You don't just wake up one day and get sick of it and you don't do it anymore. It's not the way it's sold to you. It's not the culture. It's certainly not the theological foundation of these churches, is to just say, yeah, it's been great having you here. See you later, have a nice life. No, they have a vested interest in keeping you in, be that financial, emotional, psychosocial, in terms of, warm bodies to put on seats or volunteers that are needed. But, they've got an agenda. They need to build this organisation. They need to make it strong. They need to make it financially viable. And so they're not offering anybody any way out. Once you're in, and there's all kinds of things that they will tell, and we've heard them say it, all the threats and the different expectations that are put on you to actually stay hooked in, to just get up every day and church is here I am, I'm part of the house, and just to stay plugged in there. And the only way out is through that upwards arrow to the purple bubble. Now, the reason why we can't just zoom out, and you can see there's no actual straightforward way back to general society, is because we're different. It's changed us. So we've gone from being blue to being red, and now we're back halfway somewhere between blue and red to purple. We're different, we're changed. We've been disillusioned. We might have been incredibly wounded. We've taken on all of this spiritual knowledge, and some of it is very, very real, and spiritual experiences that are very, very real, and we can't just throw those away, because a lot of them still ring true to our values and still ring true to our personal experience. So we're not going to just chuck those out. So we bring that with us. So we can't go blue again, we've got to go purple. That's what purple is. Purple is the conglomeration of who we used to be before we went through the door into the red, and now we're back to purple. And you can see there on the extreme right hand side, there's actually no way for the diaspora to come back in to that church culture. So people talk about feeling in between, they talk about feeling lost in space, they talk about feeling swinging, out there on a limb, and because this is what it looks like. There's no way into the church except through this very narrow door that they've created, and everybody will, that they sell that to you. Come on, come through the narrow door, come into your true family in Christ. Okay, so we do that. We go through the very, very desirable narrow door, and then we go through all the motions and become completely immersed in our lives into this culture, this church culture. But then something happens, and we either, take the blue pill or the red pill, whichever one it is, or we just stand back and go, hang on a minute, and then we decide to go, or we can leave, but it's like the Hotel California. You can check out any time you want, but you can't actually ever leave because a lot of that stuff goes with you. You can't go back and unlearn what you've learned or unknow what you now know. And a lot of it you don't want to because it was real. The friendships were real. The inspiration was real. The encouragement was real. It was all so real. And so we don't want to actually let go of a lot of that. And so we're purple now. We got a little bit of blue, a little bit of red. And when you look at the dynamic, and this is what I've indicated you'll see in General Society and Hillsong. It got this little cycle, this little self-perpetuating cycle. Well, that's their dynamic. That's their energy, General Society just sort of goes round, 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 not paying much attention to the church culture, which has got its own momentum. It's just blah, 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 around here. And there we are. The purple ones out on the side. We're trying to get some momentum, but we can't go back. They blocked that door. We can see that, and then we're trying to find some sort of interface with General Society again, because that's where we find ourselves. Maybe through no fault of our own, or maybe yes, we did actually want to get out, but being out is sometimes harder than being in, because where do you belong? Where do you put your energy? What do you believe? What are you prepared to compromise? What have you lost? What needs healing? So there's all of that. And that's what this little journey line is about. That we know we can't go back. We have to come back to General Society, but we're different. We're changed. We know things. We've learned things. We've seen things. And we can't unlearn, unknow, and unsee them. So it's a journey back. It's a journey back. So what I'm hoping you'll see in this diagram is just some of the little pathways that happen. It might help you sort of perhaps it articulates a little bit of your experience. I know I definitely feel more on the bluish side of purple. I feel like I've been able to navigate a path forward back into society where I feel comfortable, but I've also got a little bit purple there because some of the things that I learned, in my church experience and Christian experience were really precious to me and really valuable and have proven very, very important in my life, and I'm not willing to let those go. But, I could never go back. Like, the path is closed to me now. I can't, and I've tried several times to move from my purple back to my red so often, but that block just keeps coming up again of the things I know now, things I've seen, the ways I've been hurt, the ways I've been lied to, or whatever. I mean, that's just my personal stuff. I don't know what your personal stuff is, but I guess in looking at this diagram again, we can get stuck in the purple. We can get stuck there and very much concentrating on the fact that we can't go back and saying, okay, well, I don't want to, but I feel wronged. I feel that this is not fair, that I'm now stuck out here. I don't belong to society and I don't belong to church. I mean, I know I've felt that for a really long time. Didn't really belong anywhere. I had to make a new place for myself. But the thing is, we do belong in General Society. We have a place there, spiritually, emotionally, intellectually, academically, psychosocially, much more than what church would have us believe. Because within church culture, within the red bubble, all of that is very, very generic. You can only think certain things, you can only believe certain things, say certain things, behave in certain ways. And it really is, a culture unto itself. And they would have us believe that general society is bad, it's wrong, it's, but it's actually not. It's actually not that bad. And a lot of the things we thought we were getting saved from are actually really positive, really positive. Particularly, I think, for people who have experienced a lot of shame in their lives, when they felt like they had a lot to be ashamed for, there's actually some really, really constructive and awesome things you can do to make yourself feel better from shame that are not connected to the kind of oppression and shaming strategies that are endemic in churches and in their theologies. And I know firsthand what that is like. So, having come out of my purple and being a lot more blue than I used to be, I would say general society is not a bad place to be. I don't think you should be scared of it, because they're a lot more tolerant than you've been led to believe. The world out here is great. We're allowed to just be who we are. So if you want to bring a little bit of your Christian experience, your beliefs, your values, you want to bring that into general society, you can do that. Guess what? No one's going to care. I think we've been told and taught that it was a really big deal and that it would matter so much, and that they hate us all, and this persecution complex of general society hates the church. No, general society doesn't hate the church. They just hate some of the stupid things they do sometimes. And they think that, I think the thing that really irks me at times is the arrogance of thinking that, this church culture thing where they believe that everything that they do is good because it's ordained by God, and yet, you see some of the most horrific things, hear about some of the most shocking things, and God didn't make it all okay, and God didn't stop it from happening, and God doesn't absolve them, So anyway, I hope this has been helpful for you. It's been helpful for me. I hope, if anything, it just kind of clarifies what it feels like to be in each one of these little bubbles, and the fact that you can live in whichever bubble you want to, and it's perfectly okay, or none at all if you want to pop out of your purple bubble and go to yellow or chartreuse. Knock yourself out. You can actually do anything you want and it will be okay. Okay, I hope you've enjoyed this. Your feedback is absolutely welcome. I'd love to hear what you've got to say, and I'll see you next time.